So, if you are over the age of 40, your skin is quietly producing this completely invisible, highly specific chemical right now.
Yeah, and it is like actively changing the way you smell.
Right. It's altering the lipid profile of your clothing. It's embedding itself into your pillowcases
Yeah.
and, shifting your whole biological footprint.
And the craziest part is that you are probably the absolute last person to realize it's even happening.
Exactly. Which creates this fascinating but honestly kind of tragic social dynamic. I mean, we are so comfortable talking about the visible milestones of aging, right? Like gray hair or
Oh,
wrinkles.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But the second we cross into the invisible biology of how our personal scent evolves, we just hit this massive cultural wall. People instantly internalize it as a personal failing.
Which is just completely heartbreaking. Millions of people notice this faint, unfamiliar scent on themselves, or, they catch it on a spouse or an aging parent, and they quietly panic.
They assume their hygiene is slipping.
Right, so they go buy these clinical strength antibacterial soaps, they scrub their skin raw, they douse themselves in heavy colognes, just trying to fix a perceived flaw.
But they are deploying the completely wrong tools to solve a biological mystery. Putting harsh astringents on this specific chemical shift is actually counterproductive. I mean, the shame surrounding this is entirely misplaced because we're dealing with complex lipid chemistry here, not a lack of cleanliness.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mission of this deep dive is to basically take a wrecking ball to that shame. We're going to explore the deeply fascinating, slightly mind-blowing skin chemistry behind why our body scent shifts as we age.
And we are pulling from an incredible stack of sources today to do that.
Yes, we are looking at pioneering cosmetic science research out of Japan from the early 2000s, controlled studies from the Nonenal Chemical Senses Center, insights from the Journal of Investigative Dermatology, and longitudinal data from the National Institute on Aging.
Yeah, and the consensus across all that research is remarkably clear. I mean, we are looking at a predictable, universal shift in the skin's metabolic processes. And understanding the mechanics of that shift is really the only way to manage it effectively.
So whether you are in your 40s and noticing this biochemical shift in yourself, or you're trying to figure out how to navigate this topic with like an 80-year-old parent, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you think about human aging.
Let's start by defining the lived experience. What actually is this mystery scent?
Well, the source material describes it with very specific notes. It's a faint, greasy, grassy, or slightly waxy aroma.
Which is fundamentally distinct from the acute, acrid smell of typical sweat or a bacterial breakdown that we normally associate with body odor. This particular scent profile tends to be highly localized.
Localized where exactly?
You'll find it mostly concentrated around the scalp, the back of the neck, and the upper back.
But here is the central paradox. The person actively producing this waxy scent is almost never the one who detects it first. A spouse or an adult child is usually the one pointing it out, which leads to some spectacularly defensive conversations.
Oh, definitely.
Why is the producer completely blind to it? It seems counterproductive that our brains would intentionally ignore a chemical change happening on our own skin.
Well, it comes down to a neurobiological mechanism called olfactory fatigue. Sensory adaptation is critical for our survival. Our olfactory receptors are basically designed to become desensitized to continuous, unchanging stimuli.
Okay, so because the scent is always there, we just tune it out.
Exactly. If your brain dedicated constant processing power to your own baseline biological scent, it would consume an enormous amount of neurological bandwidth. You would struggle to detect the sudden new scents in your environment that actually matter for survival, like the smell of smoke, spoiled food, or a predator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the brain actively sacrifices self-awareness of your own scent in order to maintain acute environmental awareness.
Which sets the stage for the ultimate misunderstanding. A family member thinks they are gently dropping a hint about taking a shower, and the person receiving the comment feels completely attacked because they, literally just stepped out of the shower an hour ago.
Right. They cannot smell what the other person is smelling, so they assume they're being insulted.
The communication breaks down instantly. The accused person gets defensive, and the family member feels frustrated. This is the tragic outcome of treating a systemic chemical change as a basic hygiene issue.
It really is.
I'm calling this the hygiene myth, and it is incredibly destructive. Trying to scrub this specific waxy scent away with a harsh detergent or trying to mask it with heavy cologne is essentially like trying to put out a grease fire with a bucket of water.
That grease fire analogy is actually scientifically perfect. You are trying to apply a water-based surfactant solution to a deeply complex lipid or oil-based reaction.
And when you throw water on a grease fire, the rapid expansion of steam just splatters the burning oil everywhere.
Exactly. When you throw harsh alkaline detergents at this biological shift, you just strip the skin of its essential acid mantle. You actually provoke the skin into overproducing more oil to compensate for the damage barrier.
Oh man, so you are entirely missing the underlying mechanism and likely making the situation worse.
Yeah, you completely fail to neutralize the underlying chemical that is actually causing the scent.
Okay, so if the water-based approach is failing, and this isn't sweat or dirt, what molecular reaction is actually taking place on the surface of our skin to create this specific grassy note?
Well, the root of this whole phenomenon is a chemical compound called 2-nonenal, or in dermatological research, they often just shorten it to non-genol.
Non-ganol, okay.
And to understand where it comes from, we have to look at your skin's sebum.
The natural oils.
Exactly. Throughout your life, your sebaceous glands are constantly producing a complex matrix of natural oils to maintain skin barrier function and hydration. And one of the primary fatty acids in that oil matrix is palmitoleic acid.
So we have palmitoleic acid being pumped out continuously to keep the skin pliable. But 20-year-olds are producing this acid too, right? And they don't produce 2-nonscrunal. So what changes the equation?
The critical variable is your skin's antioxidant defense system. During your 20s and 30s, alongside that palmitoleic acid, your skin produces a robust supply of natural antioxidants. One of the heavy hitters in this defense system is a lipid called squalene.
Squalene. I've seen that in a lot of skincare products, actually.
Yeah, you can visualize squalene as a biological sacrificial shield. When reactive oxygen molecules in the air hit your skin, the squalene takes the hit. It neutralizes the oxygen, preventing it from attacking and degrading the palmitoleic acid.
It's like a built-in preservation system. But I'm assuming that squalene's shield doesn't maintain its strength indefinitely.
No, it does not. And this is a detail that genuinely shocks most people. The clinical data shows this decline doesn't begin in our 70s or 80s. The systemic drop in squalene production begins in our 40s.
Wait, really? Our 40s?
Yeah. As we hit middle age, the skin simply cannot manufacture enough of this antioxidant to maintain the shield.
Let me make sure I'm connecting these dots correctly. If the squalene shield drops, the reactive oxygen in the environment now has a direct path to the palmitoleic acid. Are we essentially talking about an oxidation process? Like, are we quite literally rusting on a micro level?
Oxidation is the exact mechanism. It is the biological equivalent of rusting. Think about the chemical reaction that occurs when you cut an apple open and expose the flesh to the air.
The oxygen interacts with it, and the apple turns brown.
Right. In the case of your skin, when the squalene defenses drop, the oxygen cleaves the double bonds in the palmitoleic acid. The acid oxidizes, it rusts, and it molecularly breaks apart to form a completely new compound, which is 2-nonenal.
And because 2-nonenal is a completely different molecule than sweat, that explains why someone using a clinical-strength antiperspirant is seeing absolutely zero results. The aluminum just isn't binding to this specific fatty acid, is it? We are targeting the entirely wrong biological system.
We are targeting the wrong glands entirely. Antiperspirants use aluminum salts to physically plug the eccrine glands, your sweat glands, which primarily secrete water and electrolytes to cool the body.
But 2-nonenal isn't a water-based secretion.
No, it's a byproduct of sebum, which means it is released gradually through your sebaceous glands. These oil pores are highly concentrated on your scalp, the back of your neck, and your upper chest and back. You can plug your underarm sweat glands all day long, but it will do absolutely nothing to stop lipid oxidation on your scalp.
That structural difference in the molecules must also explain the laundry nightmare mentioned in the sources. 2-nonenal seems to aggressively bind to pillowcases and shirt collars, lingering much longer than regular sweat ever could.
It is highly lipophilic and hydrophobic.
Yeah.
Because it is an oil, it repels water. When water-based sweat hits a fabric, it eventually evaporates, or it washes out relatively easily because it is water-soluble.
But lipids transfer directly into the microscopic fibers of your bedding and clothing?
Yes, and they establish strong bonds, especially with synthetic materials like polyester. If you have ever tried to get a splash of olive oil out of a silk shirt using just water, you understand the physics at play here. 2 non-concal transfers from the skin to the pillowcase every single night, building up a concentrated layer of oxidized lipids.
This molecular breakdown changes the entire narrative. If you don't understand the lipid chemistry, you assume you are failing at basic hygiene. You think you're dirty.
Exactly.
But you are just experiencing a highly documented universal oxidation process that begins in middle age. It is just human biology running its course.
The mechanism is completely universal. The specific volume of 2-non-condyl produced will vary from person to person based on genetics and lifestyle, but the fundamental decline of the squalene shield and the subsequent lipid oxidation happens to every human being.
But looking at this purely as a breakdown of our antioxidant shield makes it sound like a biological glitch. It frames aging as this unavoidable mechanical failure where the chassis just starts rusting. Is it possible there is an actual physiological purpose to this specific compound being produced?
This is where the scientific narrative shifts from depressing to genuinely profound. We have to look at the experimental work conducted by the Nonenal Chemical Senses Center. Their researchers study the intricacies of taste and smell, and they wanted to isolate how human beings perceive and categorize age-related scents.
They designed a series of highly controlled, double-blind recognition studies, right?
Yes.
And the methodology they use here is fascinating. They went to great lengths to remove any variables related to actual hygiene or lifestyle, didn't they?
They really did. They separated participants into 3 distinct age groups: young adults, middle-aged adults, and older adults.
Yeah.
They required every single participant to wash with the exact same unscented pharmaceutical-grade cleanser.
So everyone smells exactly the same from a soap perspective.
Right. They also restricted their diets to remove any food-related odor variables. Then, they had them sleep in identical sterilized T-shirts for several nights to capture a pure baseline of their physiological scent.
Okay.
After that, they placed the T-shirts in sealed jars and brought in independent assessors, which notably included young children and the grandchildren of some of the older participants.
So they have these kids smelling jars of meticulously controlled T-shirts. What did the data show?
The results were staggering. The independent assessors, particularly the very young children, could consistently and reliably isolate the scent of the older adults from the younger groups. Remember, everyone was perfectly clean. There was no bacterial body odor.
But the human olfactory system is sensitive enough to detect the subtle underlying presence of 2-non-kikol.
Exactly.
Wait, so the researchers didn't view this ability to detect 2-non-kikol as just humans noticing a random byproduct of aging. They proposed our bodies are doing this on purpose.
They hypothesized that this specific age-related scent profile evolved as a critical biological signal. For the vast majority of human history, we lived in multi-generational nomadic tribes. We lacked written records, birth certificates, or even the complex language necessary to easily articulate lineage and hierarchy.
In that environment, we relied heavily on our chemical senses to navigate intricate social structures and identify kin.
Yes.
That means 2-non-nonal was essentially serving as an invisible chemical name tag. It was broadcasting, hey, I am an elder. I possess the institutional knowledge of this tribe.
It was a biological signature of maturity. It helped family members, specifically infants and young children whose visual acuity was still developing, to recognize the older generations. When a child inhaled that specific grassy scent, it triggered a subconscious neurological response that signaled safety, familiarity, and family connection. It directed them toward the caretakers.
That evolutionary context completely shatters the emotional weight of this topic. We take the subtle scent that millions of people are deeply humiliated by this thing they are frantically trying to scrub off their bodies in the shower, and we reframe it entirely.
It's so powerful.
It is not a hygiene failure. It is an invisible molecular thread of connection between a grandparent and a grandchild. It is a biological badge of survival.
It replaces the paradigm of shame with a paradigm of reverence.
Yeah.
And critically, once we stop fighting our own biology with harsh, stripping chemicals out of embarrassment, we can actually start managing the physical realities of it using actual science.
Because even if we appreciate the beautiful evolutionary history of kin recognition, we still live in the modern world. People still want to gently manage their body's overall oxidative load, and the sources provided a very rigorous inside-out and outside-in roadmap for how to do that.
The foundational rule of this roadmap is patience. You are attempting to shift your body's systemic oxidation levels. You cannot do that overnight with a single application of a magic serum. It requires weeks of consistent compounding habits to rebuild those cellular defenses.
Let's start with the outside-in approach. We established that blasting the skin with harsh alkaline soap is a terrible idea because it destroys the acid mantle. How should we physically handle the sebum on the surface of the skin?
You need to utilize a targeted, slightly acidic, pH-balanced cleanser. And you want to focus that cleansing specifically on the areas with the highest density of sebaceous glands, the scalp, behind the ears, the back of the neck, and the upper back.
So the goal is not to scrub the skin until it squeaks.
No, the goal is to gently lift away the surface lipids before they have a prolonged opportunity to react with the oxygen in the air and break down into 2-nonenal.
And that leads directly into the environmental management, specifically the laundry. Washing a pillowcase isn't just about general tidiness, is it? It's about breaking a cycle of re-exposure.
Precisely. Because 2-nonenal is a lipid that transfers to your pillowcase every night. Sleeping on the same case for a week means you are literally rolling your skin in a concentrated layer of yesterday's oxidized oils. You need to wash your bedding, and specifically your pillowcases, much more frequently using detergents designed to break down heavy lipid bonds.
But washing a pillowcase or using a gentle cleanser only addresses the oil after it has been produced. If the root problem is this plunging squalene shield, can we actually rebuild that antioxidant barrier from the inside out using nutrition? Or is that just an exaggeration of how diet works?
It is entirely possible to reinforce that shield systemically. If your skin is struggling to manufacture squalene, you can import surrogate antioxidants through your digestive system. When you consume dietary antioxidants, they enter your systemic circulation, travel through the capillary networks in your dermis, and physically intercept free radicals before they can attack the palmitoleic acid.
The sources highlight some very specific nutritional interventions for this. We aren't just talking about a generic eat healthy message.
The clinical data points to specific polyphenol and flavonoid profiles. Berries, particularly blueberries and strawberries, contain high levels of anthocyanins, which aggressively hunt down reactive oxygen species and manage systemic inflammation. Leafy greens like spinach and kale deliver massive doses of vitamin K and lutein.
The sources also put a heavy emphasis on beta-carotene and green tea. How do those specifically interact with the skin barrier?
Well, sweet potatoes and carrots are loaded with beta-carotene, which your body converts into vitamin A. Vitamin A directly regulates the cellular turnover of the skin and fortifies the lipid barrier against oxidative wear. And green tea is perhaps the most potent intervention. It contains a polyphenol called EGCG, which is famously effective at supporting antioxidant activity throughout the entire dermal matrix.
To pull this out of the abstract chemistry and ground it in reality, the sources detail the story of a man named Michael. He is a 74-year-old living in Texas who was struggling to manage his high cholesterol. His son had read up on the lipid oxidation science behind 2-nonenal and gently shared the information with him.
And Michael's reaction is the ideal template for this. He didn't view it as an insult to his hygiene. He approached the science with genuine curiosity.
He implemented the nutritional roadmap. He started eating significant amounts of leafy greens, sweet potatoes, and berries specifically to help with the skin oxidation. But because the human body is a deeply interconnected system, those exact same dietary antioxidants also began neutralizing the oxidized LDL cholesterol in his bloodstream.
That's right.
He vastly improved his cardiovascular health by trying to manage the squalene levels in his skin.
It beautifully illustrates the holistic nature of systemic oxidative stress. When you supply the body with the tools it needs to neutralize free radicals, every single organ benefits. Your skin just happens to be the largest, most visible organ in that network.
Which brings us to the most surprising pillar of managing this entire process, sleep. I understand that sleep is important, but how does lying unconscious for 8 hours physically prevent palmitoleic acid from turning into 2-non-shameless-porno?
Because sleep is not a passive state. It is a highly active biological reset. Your body operates on a strict circadian rhythm. During the deep, slow-wave phases of sleep, your cortisol levels drop, and your brain signals the release of melatonin.
Okay, so melatonin goes up.
Right, and melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone. It is one of the most potent antioxidants in the human body. It is during this deep sleep window that your body allocates resources to repair cellular damage and actively replenish your natural antioxidant defenses, including the lipid barriers in your skin.
So if you are chronically cutting that repair window short, you are essentially sending your body into the next day with a completely depleted shield.
The clinical data is unequivocal on this. Adults who consistently average under 6 hours of sleep a night exhibit drastically higher biomarkers for oxidative stress compared to those securing 7 to 8 hours. If you skip sleep, you accelerate the oxidation process. More palmitoleic acid breaks down, and more 2-nonenal is produced.
Combine a protected sleep schedule with gentle outdoor activity, which increases vasodilation and pushes those dietary antioxidants deeper into the dermal capillaries. And you create a physiological environment where excessive oxidation just struggles to take hold.
Exactly. You are systematically removing the fuel for the fire.
There's one more narrative in the source material that captures the profound emotional relief of understanding the science. Sarah, a 62-year-old woman from Ohio, was devastated because her husband kept gently mentioning a change in her scent, even immediately after she showered.
Yeah, she was buying stronger soaps, applying heavy antiperspirants, and scrubbing herself with exfoliants. Nothing worked, and her anxiety was just spiraling.
Because she was relentlessly fighting a complex lipid oxidation reaction with alkaline water and aluminum plugs, it was never going to work.
However,
Her daughter finally sat her down and explained the actual molecular chemistry of 2-nonenal. Once Sarah understood it wasn't dirt, she completely overhauled her approach. She switched to an acidic cleanser. She bought extra pillowcases and rotated them every 2 days. She incorporated EGCG from green tea and anthocyanins from berries into her diet, and she prioritized her sleep architecture.
the physical results were noticeable, but the psychological transformation was the real victory there.
She noted that the most profound shift was that she could finally speak to her husband about it without the suffocating weight of shame. It was no longer a critique of her personal cleanliness, it was just a discussion about managing lipid chemistry.
That's incredible.
The cure wasn't some miracle cosmetic product, it was a biologically supportive diet, a fresh pillowcase, and the grace of an open conversation.
That is the ultimate power of scientific literacy. When you truly understand the complex mechanisms governing your own biology, you permanently replace fear and shame with agency and self-compassion.
So let's distill all of this complex chemistry down. 2-nonenal is a heavily documented, entirely natural biological shift. It is the direct result of your skin's palmitoleic acid oxidizing as your built-in squalene offenses gradually decline starting in your 40s.
It is emphatically not a failure of hygiene. No amount of scrubbing will alter the molecular reality. But it can be managed beautifully and effectively by supporting your body's systemic defenses, utilizing gentle, pH-balanced skincare, consuming bioavailable antioxidants, and fiercely protecting your deep sleep cycles.
Understanding how your body is evolving is the ultimate form of self-care. Whether you are in your 50s and you want to proactively manage your oxidative load, or you're caring for someone in their 80s and you want to afford them the dignity they deserve, you now possess the scientific vocabulary to discuss this openly. You can dismantle the taboo completely.
You have the framework to view this not as an embarrassing physical decline, but as a sophisticated biological signature. It is a completely normal, evolutionary, profound part of the human journey.
But stepping back and looking at the big picture, this does leave us with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on. We just spent this entire deep dive exploring how human biology specifically intentionally shifts our chemical scent at midlife to help our descendants recognize us and locate their caretakers. It was a crucial survival mechanism hiding literally right under our noses.
An invisible chemical name tag that ensured the cohesion of the tribe.
If our bodies are quietly doing this with 2-nonenal, we have to ask, what other invisible chemical signals are we actively broadcasting to our families, our friends, and our communities right now that science just hasn't learned how to translate yet?
It forces you to wonder how much of our deep human connection, our empathy, and our social bonding is happening entirely outside of our conscious awareness, driven by molecules we can't even name.
The next time you hug someone you deeply love, just remember, beyond the physical embrace, there is an entire invisible chemical symphony playing in the background, continuously keeping us connected. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.